gun safety. So I want to thank you also to all the students who are tuning in via live stream to participate in this discussion. And as a reminder, this event is being recorded, and members of my staff and the media will be taking photos and videos, but the recording will be accessible to all of you to be able to use in any format that you would like. As you all know, our nation has faced too many tragedies where guns were in the hands of those who should not have them. In my view, it is clear that Congress, as well as state and local governments, must do more to prevent senseless gun violence that is devastating communities throughout our nation. Just since the tragic and horrific shooting in Parkland, Florida, in February of this year, there have been 34 more shootings across the country. And since I came to Congress in 2013, there have been more than 1,600. 26,000 children and teens have been killed by gun violence since Columbine. And as we all know from yesterday's walkout, that was 19 years ago. It has galvanized, Parkland has galvanized students here in the county and around the country. You are our future voters and our future leaders, and you have said enough is enough. And there is solid evidence that it has had a very important impact. You and all of the other amazing young people across our country have awakened our national conscience and are spurring action at every level of government. You have created a drumbeat across America, a drumbeat of persistence, determination, insistence, eloquence, energy, and courage. I've heard from hundreds of local students, teachers, parents, administrators, and school support staff who have reached out to express their support for improved school safety and improved laws to prevent weapons of war from falling into the wrong hands. Many students here and across the country are pushing for change, and while I'm sure there are differences of opinion, the most important thing is that you are speaking up and showing up for the conversation. I'm anxious to hear how what is going around the country impacts all of you and what you think we should do about it. In my view, we can both protect the Second Amendment for law-abiding citizens and do more to prevent gun violence. These are not mutually exclusive goals. But as a student told me in Washington, D.C., the right to own a gun cannot outweigh the right to live. Ventura County is sadly no stranger to gun violence. Just last month, there was a tragic shooting at the Oaks, the mall in Thousand Oaks, where a young mother lost her life. Nor are we a stranger to gun violence that affects students. I often think about the two young people from our community, Larry King and Veronica Weiss. Larry was born in Ventura 10 years ago while sitting in his junior high school classroom in Oxnard. Larry was shot twice in the back of the head, executed by one of his own classmates simply because he was different. Veronica was raised in Thousand Oaks and loved to play baseball. In fact, she was the only girl among 500 baseball players in the Westlake Little League growing up. In May 2014, Veronica was taking a break from organizing a charity event at UC Santa Barbara when she was killed by an angry and disturbed individual on a shooting rampage that lasted for about 10 minutes. These are just two of the thousands of Americans whose bright futures have been extinguished by gun violence. Families are destroyed and communities are shattered because guns and weapons of war like AR-15s too easily and too often get into the hands of those who should not have them. From Sandy Hook, when I was first sworn into Congress, to Orlando, to San Bernardino, to Las Vegas, the only action Congress has offered each time is sadly a moment of silence on the House floor and little else. The Speaker and the leadership said, for each tragedy, it's too early. Families and communities have to grieve. It's just too soon. But I hope and I strongly believe that this time is and will be different. In fact, things have already begun to change. In Florida, the mostly conservative legislature passed a new state law that imposed a 3-day waiting period for most purchases of guns, raised the minimum age for buying those weapons to 21, and banned the possession of bump stocks. This was truly extraordinary and a very consequential win for the state of Florida, and their action will stand as an example for Congress and the rest of the country. And just a few weeks ago in Congress, we recently passed legislation to make some improvements to the National Gun Background Check System and provide additional support for school safety grant programs and school-based mental health programs, and finally to begin again research on gun violence and to collect evidence-based data to improve decision-making on prevention across America. To be sure, these are very small, incremental steps, truly designed to take the wind out of the real changes we need to make. But let's be clear, these changes came from the demands of students just like you. And I can assure you that if these gun safety measures, albeit still not enough, would have never ever happened in Florida or in Congress without your collective voice. Never let anyone tell you that your voice will not be heard or that it will not have an impact, because clearly it can, it has, and it will. I called this student town hall today so that we could hear your stories, your thoughts, your worries, and your solutions. Not to be trite, but you are our future, and you have an absolute right to attend a safe school where you can concentrate on learning without worry. And so for today's discussion, let's not assume that we all agree exactly on the way forward. I want us to have a respectful conversation if there's a difference in opinion. And if there are differences of opinion, they need to be heard and listened to, because we cannot move forward unless we truly listen to each other. So now the most important part of the program is to introduce several stellar high school students who will start off the discussion by sharing their perspectives on gun safety. Many of these students have been leading the movement here in our community to bring more attention to these issues and help put together this event today. I'm so proud of and impressed by all of you and the young people who have gotten involved to speak out about the issues that matter to them. First, we'll hear from Bella Rabakowski, a junior at Newbury Park High School, and Sam Coates, a junior at Ventura High School. Bella and Sam have been extremely helpful and played an important role in organizing this town hall. And from there, I'm going to sit down with the students and we will hear from all of them as we move forward. So thank you very much.
I am here today not because I've had an experience with gun violence, but because I want to prevent it before I hear my own school's name on the news, before I have to text my mother saying, I'm on lockdown, don't text back, I love you, before I have thoughts and prayers flooding my way. Throughout this entire experience, I have been so amazed by the activism and dedication of my peers. Yesterday, approximately 100 of my fellow Newbury Park students and I walked off school campus to call for gun control and safety in schools, despite the fact that makeup work would not be allowed to be made up and that we will now have to serve a Saturday school. You all are an inspiration to me. Thank you for coming here today. Thank you for showing your dedication to this cause. We go to school from 8 to 2, have extracurriculars and loads of homework. I know our weekends are precious, so I have so much respect for all of you that made an effort to be here today. I have a love for the democratic process. I cannot wait till my 18th birthday when I can finally head to the voting booth and cast my first ballot. But until then, I am not powerless. We are not powerless. It is exciting to see my peers around me discovering this and seeing that we have the potential to make change. And I am so encouraged to keep fighting. Our voices have an impact. We may not have a vote yet, but we can lobby for bills. We can meet with our representatives just like we're doing today. We can make a stand and make sure that we are heard. Events like this town hall are so significant. In a democracy, we elect officials that we trust to represent us. But how can they represent us if we don't communicate to them what we want and how we feel? As high schoolers, we may not have voted in our representatives, but they are still our representatives, fighting for our best interest. It's so important that we utilize every chance that we get to be able to communicate with them and share with them our vision for this nation. I look around this room and I see a room full of patriots, and not because we agree with everything that our nation is at the moment, but we see room for improvement and we're willing to take a stand and fight for it. These past few months, the youth of America have made a stand. Walkouts, marches, sit-ins, protests, event after event, we have been loud and we have been clear. We deserve to be safe. Each of these demonstrations have been met with a similar response. Our school administrations put their heads down and wait for the student activism storm to pass, and people wonder, are they done yet? My answer to this is no, not at all. This is the beginning. This is the beginning of something big. Time after time, there are tragedies. They are discussed, they are mourned, and they are forgotten. But not this time. This time is different. We are the difference. Thank you, Congresswoman Brownley, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Bella.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. And since most of you don't know me, I'll start by telling you a little about myself. I'm a junior at Ventura High, and I'm a CNN junkie. And like we record Jake Tapper's show, there's the little logo on the right-hand side of the crayon just burned into our screen. It's probably not healthy, but you get it. Yeah, I like that. But the 24-hour news cycle has a lot of problems, and one that's really relevant to this issue is that you'll hear about a march or a series of town halls or, like, God forbid, a shooting. But it's just dropped by the media within a week in order to report on whatever the president tweeted. And I think that if those kids in Parkland had not done what they did in starting this movement, if we did not have the support of our elected representatives like Congresswoman Brownley, then this mass murder, the random and brutal and totally preventable killing of just 17 innocent people, it would have dominated headlines for a week, and then we would have just moved on to the next tragedy. But they have put countless hours into making sure that these 17 people are more than a statistic. And the shooting in Parkland was 2 months and 7 days ago, and this movement is still going strong. We're not going to stop until the laws change to prevent another Parkland or Newtown in Las Vegas. This is not a moment, it is a movement. And I thank Congresswoman Brownley for coming out today to support us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So next we will hear from Rosita Lopez, a senior at Channel Islands High School, Anthony Palomera, excuse me. It's written down here, I think incorrectly, so. Anyway, thank you, Anthony, for being here. Anthony's a senior at Fillmore High School, and Claire Renard, a junior at Foothill Technology High School in Ventura. So welcome, Rosita, Anthony, and Claire.
Y oto, Dios Cristo Vilkutnot compañionadze. Buenos días, muchas gracias por acompañarnos hoy. Good morning. Thank you for being here today. My name is Rosita Lopez. I'm a Zapotec youth. I'm 18 and I'm a senior at China Island High School. I've been a part of my Cubs Techio youth group for almost 4 years now. I am here today to speak to you all about my experience at March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. I was one of the lucky students who was chosen to be the voice of many youth here, youth in Oxnard. I never thought that gun control would be an issue or that gun control would be fought for by our youth. I am proud of myself for taking this chance and standing up for what I know is right. During this past trip, not only did I experience this sensation of emotions, mixed emotions, but I also met new people who were amazing, and we got to know each other on a very personal level. We visited monuments that I thought I would only see in a textbook, and being there is something very wonderful. We visited the Lincoln Memorial, Martin Luther King Memorial, and the Washington Memorial. We had a Capitol tour along with 2 trips to different museums, the African American Museum and the Portraits Museum. Being in the presence of Emma and Edna was probably the best thing ever. The energy was amazing. These 2 girls are amazing. Their speeches made me tear up. And I'm not afraid to say that we stand together. Thank you.
So I'm going to start off by introducing myself once again. So my name is Lorenzo Anthony Palavana, and I'm a senior at Former High School. I've been working for around 4 years now, since my freshman year, with an organization called One Step LFS in Fillmore. And along with One Step, we have different groups around Ventura County that we work with. MyCop, Future Leaders of America, and Cause from Oxnard, Santa Paula, and Ventura. And with this group, we were able to receive donations to have the opportunity to be able to go to DC and be able to participate in March for Our Lives. So all these different youth that went, there were 6 of us who had the opportunity to go, and we all had our own personal stories of activism that we've had occur in our high schools. We were all future leaders, I guess you can say, and we've all had our own commitment and hours of work put in to our own personal walkouts at our schools and making sure going to our school districts to talk about this issue. So we were able to participate in March for Our Lives. We weren't too close to the front of the stage, but we were still able to get the gist of all the information that was said there. We got to hear testimonies from youth from all the way from Los Angeles to New York. All across the nation, we heard their testimonies about their experience with gun violence and what they want to see being changed in this nation. We also got to tour the Capitol and all the different monuments that we were able to see there. We also got to see the roots of this country, its history, as well as make history in itself that day. I think that we have a lot of effort, we have a lot of passion into what we do, and this is just the beginning, honestly. This wave, or these waves of different student activism from all across the nation has been a wonderful testimony to the youth's effort and ambition in this country, and I don't think we've seen the last of it. I think we have a lot more ways to go with the change that we're going to see, hopefully, in Congress in our elections, but soon enough we'll be able to vote. Some of us, 17, 18, will be able to vote in this year's election, and more so after as the years continue on. But with these walkouts, we want to make sure, and all these acts that the students are that they're leading and they're initiating, we want to make sure that we're giving the proper encouragement for our youth and making sure that they have all the resources that they need to continue making a difference in this nation, because we are the future of this country. We will be enacting the future laws. We will be at the front lines of what this nation will be experiencing, so to speak. But when it comes down to control, we are going to advocate for our lives or die trying.
Hello, my name is Claire Narr and I am 16 years old. I am a junior at Foothill Technology High School, and I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and my involvement in the March for Our Lives movement. So I'm really avid and model legislature in court. I've been in the youth and government program for 3 years now. I see some fellow youth and government delegates in the crowd. And that's what really sparked me to be invested into politics and into local government. And when I was asked by Sam Coates to talk about my experience and how I am passionate about politics through the March for Our Lives movement, I knew that it was my opportunity to use my voice to its full advantage and speak for students on my campus and other students in Ventura. So I gave a apolitical speech talking about how although gun reform, there needs to be more gun reform and we need to change current gun laws, and that's a really huge factor. We also need to address how mental illness is a big factor in this as well, and that we need to be focusing and taking care of the students at our high schools, making sure that they feel supported and that that we are there for them too, because we are voices, but we also need to make sure that we are allowing other students to voice their opinions as well. So that was one way that I was a really big advocator in the movement. Also, if you took part in the Ventura movement, you saw me with a bullhorn giving chants in a neon orange vest. And just seeing the atmosphere and how many people were down there spending their weekend advocating, marching through downtown Ventura was just inspiring. To see that when we come together as one, to see what we can do as a whole, we're infinite. We're bound to do anything. And with the support of Julia Brownley and other representatives in Southern California, it just shows that we have the support. And like what he said, we just need to make sure that we are giving our students in our high schools the proper tools to vote, to register to vote, and to make sure that they know and they know what our representatives advocate for, what their thoughts are on gun reform and mental illness, and that we are addressing it as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. And now I'd like to introduce Hannah Yale, a sophomore at Foothill Technology High School, and Sam Gordon, a junior at Rancho Campana High School in Camarillo.
Hi, I'm Hannah Yale. I'm 15 and I go to Foothill Technology High School, and I organize the participation of students in Ventura in the National School Walkout Against Gun Violence, which occurred yesterday. So when the Parkland shooting happened in February, it started out as, oh no, another shooting happened. But the students from Parkland really stood up and started making their voices heard and saying that this is a problem that we can solve and a problem that we need to solve. So that resonated with me, and I knew that I had to do something to bring awareness to gun violence in our community and to encourage members of Congress to help us put a stop to it. So I attended a city hall meeting last month where 2 city council members were proposing new gun legislation in Ventura. I went there, I spoke, and we unanimously passed new gun legislation, including raising the minimum age of gun ownership to 21. So after that, I decided that we needed to walk out, we needed to go to City Hall, we needed to bring students together. So I got in contact with city council members, with Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson, with the press, and everything just started falling together. The hardest thing was getting kids to abandon their perfect reputations at school. Faculty did say you could get detention, you will get a truancy. There was even a rumor going around saying the kids walking out wouldn't be able to go to prom. But 250 of us ended up at City Hall anyway. I definitely couldn't have done any of this without the support of my parents, and that goes for all of the students who are part of this movement and making a change. And
I'm just really proud of all of us who are coming together and saying that this isn't a natural disaster, this isn't the Thomas Fire, this is something that we can do something to change.
Thank you, Hannah.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Samantha Gordon. I'm 16. I'm a junior at Rancho Campana High School. And things were a little different for me. I'm going to talk about my process. I planned the walkout that was yesterday at my school. My school opened 3 years ago. I will be part of the first full 4-year graduating class next year. We have our first graduating class this year of seniors. We have about 750 students total. So small school, word gets around pretty quick for stuff. Sorry, I need my notes. So I guess on March 17th, there was supposed to be something nationwide where students were supposed to walk out of their school and sit in silence for 17 minutes to honor the lives of the 17 lost at Parkland. And I was planning to participate in that, and as 150 students were walking out of our school, our principal kind of ushered us into the Performing Arts Center, and it kind of gave us the vibe of we were not allowed to walk out, or I don't know, we all went to the Performing Arts Center, and we had a student speak for 2 minutes about the issue, then we took 1 minute of silence, and then an adult got on the stage and gave a presentation on when this happens, this is what to do, run, hide, fight. And it was very off-putting because we were trying to give the message of this should never happen again and this is how we're standing up. And then we had adults tell us that when this happens, here's what you do. So it was off-putting, it put a bad taste in my mouth. So I got with my friend Lily and my friend Duncan, and together, the three of us, for the next month, we took every lunch, every study hall period, every hour before late start to plan our walkout, which was yesterday. And it all kind of started with the shared Google Doc of brainstorming what we have to do, you know? And we tried going through admin, our thankfully awesome and supportive principal and vice principal. It was interesting because, you know, we searched for approval, like, can we do this, can we do this? And they were like, we can't help you, you know, because they are technically not allowed to support what we were doing. But, so yeah, and yesterday, 100 students, I led down a 3-mile route to our city hall. And our Vice Mayor of Camarillo spoke there to us briefly, and we had some student speakers, and it was really amazing. And my goal really was just to start this conversation of this is an issue. And we, even though we're young, some of us can't vote yet, to really encourage kids to get their head in the game. And everyone's reaction was mostly positive. Whether it was students who weren't walking out or students who opposed our views or teachers who couldn't technically get involved with this. Obviously, there were people who tried to, you know, cause backlash and stuff like that, but you know, it doesn't matter at the end of the day because like some guy driving by while we're walking saying, go back to school, losers, that's not gonna persuade us to stop, you know? It's bigger than that, and so, yeah, and all we tried to do was really encourage our fellow peers to educate themselves on what our policies are and who our candidates are, so that when it's time for us to vote, that they can really support who they want to be supporting, and to stay educated on our laws and our policies all around the nation so that we can better the future ahead. So yeah.
So last but not least, we will hear from Alex Unger, a freshman at Newbury Park High School, and Isabel Macardo, a junior at Ventura High School.
Hi, I'm Alex Unger. Over the past few months, seeing the reaction
from the Parkland shooting has been amazing, and the movement that has been started, I think, will not be stopped and will not be silenced, and that is super important to me, and I think to a lot of you here today. However, there are certain things that media doesn't pick up on, whether it's because the death toll isn't high enough, or because of race, or because of social standing. And so for me, my personal experience is that my uncle committed suicide using a semi-automatic firearm. And so in middle school for me, I knew a girl who would self-harm by cutting her wrists. The second anyone found out about that, they took every possible safety measure to not allow her to have knives or scissors or razors. And I don't understand why some people oppose that with guns. Because my uncle, the second he got out of high school, he spent 4 years in the military. He was well trained, he knew how to shoot. But there were still so many things along his path that had to do with mental health that I think were important warning signs of there should have been something done. So when he was in middle school, he took an entire bottle of alcohol to school, drank it, and passed out walking up the stairs to get to his third period class. And he was suspended from the school and told he had to go to family therapy. They went once, and I don't think that solved anything. And so, for me, knowing what I know about him personally, of how he had an affinity for war stories, not because he necessarily was a violent person. In fact, when I talked to every single person who was so close to him, they said he would never hurt a fly, he couldn't say no to helping anyone, but it's because he felt that that's what, like, the only thing that connected him to being a man. So that's why he felt so strongly drawn to that. And so I'm not here to tell you all the complicated things about him, of how he buried army figures in the backyard, and I spent my entire summer of kindergarten digging them up, and how much I felt connected to him through that. And I'm not here to tell you about his high school experience or his love life, but I am here to tell you that my family personally has lost a lot by that. And so, for instance, my grandparents, when they found out that their son was dead, my grandfather fell to the floor, and I don't think he's really gotten up since. And my grandma didn't believe it was true. She wanted to see his body to make sure, but you know, when you've blown through your brain, you can't exactly show that to people. So she had to pull back the sheet, and the only way she could identify him was by his tattoo of Powell skateboards. And so, talking with my family personally about this, they've said to me how ruined their lives were, and that when you lose someone like that, you can't get it back up from it. You know, you've lost a brother, a friend, a son. You just have to accept ruin into your life. That's the only way to move on. And so they personally have said to me, you were the only way we could have lived, because you came into this world right after he shot himself. He was 26. It was the day of his 26th birthday. So I never got to meet my uncle, but in a certain sense, I became their driving force of why they chose to continue living. And their lives were ruined, and no one can go back in time to change that. But what I ask is that as few people as possible have to have their lives ruined continually by this gun violence. It's redundant, and so not only these humongous mass shootings, but also having such easy access to a semi-automatic firearm that he used to kill himself. He took one bullet, and you could say whether that was because he had one intention, or whether it was because he was responsible and he did not want anyone to come along and find a loaded gun and then wreak more havoc with it. He was a responsible person, but he did have a story with mental health. Like, my entire family has struggled with depression, so honestly, I think that we really need to be pushing mental health background checks and talking about mental health a lot more, but also figuring out how it's possible to stop these statistics from happening. I mean, 80% of the time when someone tries to commit suicide with a firearm, it's fatal. Whereas overdose, the second most common method, it's fatal 3% of the time. You can't deny the fact that states with more guns accessible and more gun ownership have a higher rate of suicide.
For men, it's, I believe, 3.7 times the amount in states with higher gun owners, rather than in a state like California with lower gun ownership rates. And for women, I believe it's 7.9%. You can check my facts. This is from Harvard, the Harvard Youth Violence Prevention Center. And so 1 in 3 American families has a gun in their home. My dad owns guns. I could have easily opened that drawer and killed myself or killed someone else at a very young age where I didn't even understand anything, even though he tried to be so responsible with it by keeping them locked up. So, all in all, I'm here today to please ask for change, because my family's lives have been ruined, and I don't deserve to have my life ruined. None of these people deserve to have their lives ruined. None of you deserve to have your lives ruined. None of the families or the people at the Parkland shooting, the 17 who lost their lives there, the 14 who lost their lives at Columbine, and the one who lost his life a couple miles away on July 10th, which was his birthday. So, thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Hello and good morning. My name is Isabel Mercado. I'm a junior at Ventura High School. I'm 17. I'm the first generation, which means I'm first to be born in America. My father is from Mexico. I lived in Ventura for roughly 6 or 7 years. My father is a firefighter, so we moved around a lot. At one point, I lived in different parts of Los Angeles, and it was mainly inner cities, including Compton. I lived on Kinsman Street, where there were many incidents involving firearms. In Florida, the tragic shooting left 14 teenagers dead, and it reunited the gun debate. But to bring up the point, 14 teenagers lose their lives every month in inner cities, including Compton. This fact has already been prominent in my life, and I've known it the entire time, and to see it finally on the media being recognized is amazing. But the fact that it's been happening for over 30 years, and the peak of it was in the 90s, and that not many people saw it or tried to change it, is devastating. Many of the shootings in Compton are gang-related and often solved. There have been 25 murders in the last 12 months, and no one has seen a thing, ranging from the ages of 56 to 3 years old. And the highest number is in adolescents. This may just sound like statistics to you, but for me, it was everyday life. I saw this, I recognized it. My family knows about this. The killings in inner cities for California for teenagers make up 2/3 of it. We are the victims. We make up that statistic. I don't want to be a statistic anymore. For when you look deeper into these statistics though, you can also see racial bias. Latinos are 3 times more likely to be killed by a firearm than white people. And for African Americans, it is 9 times likely, especially if you are from the ages of 12 to 18. Your chances increase the older you get. And you can see it on the news, you can watch it on TV, you can look at your phone and be like, oh, that's a tragedy. Oh, how devastating. But you don't understand what we feel. I'm here today to fight for progress and to change because my own experience with gun violence has created a voice for me. I live with an anxiety disorder. One of my triggers for my panic attacks are loud noises because I used to hear gunshots on my street. I used to pretend that they were fireworks. I lived under harsh conditions with that, me and my sister. I now have a little brother, and we live in Ventura. And I don't want him to have to live with the same fear that I have to live with. I don't want him, when I send him off every morning going to school, I want to make sure that he gets on the bus safe and that nothing ever harms him there. I don't want to think that he'll grow up with an anxiety disorder and fear the world the way I do. I don't want him to think about the fact that one day when he goes to school, it may be his last day. No one wants to live with that fear, let alone for someone that you love. I stand today with my fellow students, not only for us, but for the next generation. No one wants to live with the scars that we have to live with. No one deserves that. I want better for my little brother. I want better for myself, and for my family, and for my community. I intend to make better for them. Enough is enough, and I'm here to take a stand. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing with all of us and doing what you are doing, and your engagement and your activism is really remarkable, and I am very, very proud of all of you. And so Bella, Sam, Rosita, Anthony, Claire, Hannah, Sam, Alex, and Isabel, thank you all very, very much for being a part of this today. And I look forward to marching with you and sitting in with you and being part of the activities that you are continuing to plan until we get the change that we want. So thank you very, very, very much. Thank you. So if you want to go sit back in the audience, that would be great. And we are going to now start a Q&A session. I think the only sort of rules of the house are that we have microphones on both sides of the room. If you want to share a story or ask a question, please raise your hands and you will be recognized. And to the adults in the room, I just want you to know that I'm going to give some preference to the young people here, because this is really about them and their engagement. I look forward to this portion of the program. So if there's someone who wants to share or ask a question, don't be shy. So my staff is going to pick, so you have to get their attention.
Hi, Congresswoman. My name is Jacob Zonis. I'm from Cleveland High School. And my question is about the feelings your Republican colleagues have on the Hill towards this student-led activism. Are they encouraged by it? Are they at all influenced by it? Have any opinions changed?
Well, they've changed ever so slightly. It is interesting, and I don't know this for a fact, but yesterday we were supposed to be in session in Congress, and that session was canceled, and I came home a day early. And I have to say, I have to kind of wonder, because of yesterday and the walkout, and 2,500 high schools across the country participated, whether that had something to do with it. I don't know. I surmise that. It's my opinion. Changing the minds in Congress has been hard, and as I said, after so many incidences, we've just had moments of silence and not any action. The only action that has taken place in Congress relative to gun violence, at least in the House, are two things. One, they actually passed a resolution that repealed some of the safeguards so that people who have mental illness could have, again, access to guns. The other bill that they passed, neither one of these bills are going to go to the Senate or be heard by the Senate, but the other bill that they passed out of the House was to say that if your state had a concealed weapon legislation rules, that if you are in Arizona and concealed weapons, you can walk on the streets with your weapons. If when you come to California, that you would be allowed in California even though California didn't have the same law. So that bill did not pass either. In the Senate, there has been some effort back early on in 2013 to reinstate the ban on assault weapons by Senator Feinstein, our senator from California, but that bill never came to the House for us to vote in. So I am not sure exactly what the next steps are, and as I said in my opening remarks, We passed a large omnibus spending plan so that our country has a budget by which to operate and keep government open, and part of that they passed this improvement on the NICS system and some grants for schools, for school safety, and again this research, which there's been a ban on research on gun violence for a very long time, so they reinstated the research. So those are small steps, but we have bipartisan bills in Congress to close the loopholes on background checks, to ban assault weapons, to ban bump stocks. I mean, there's a whole host of bills that I will tell you have bipartisan support, but yet those bills have not come to the floor for a vote. So the reality is that the Speaker of the House has the authority to bring bills or to not bring bills to the floor, and so far he has not brought those bipartisan bills for us to weigh in on. And we have to continue to, I think, use our voices to make sure that our democracy is exercised and that those bills that are supported in a bipartisan way do come to the floor for us to vote. And I do believe if they did come to the floor, they would indeed pass. I think the votes are there. So thank you for the question.
Here, and then we'll go to Zach next.
Hi, my name is Gus Grass. I'm a student at Newbury Park High School, and I'm also a member of Youth in Government. There was a shooting in San Bernardino a few years ago at a group facility for special needs citizens. Because my older sister Clara is a special needs citizen and attends two very similar facilities right here in Ventura County, one in Thousand Oaks and one in Simi, my family was hit a little harder with this news. I want to leave here today knowing that this county, this state, and this country can be a safer place for my sister and her peers in such facilities. I'm not saying I want an intense security system implemented around her group living home. She shouldn't feel like she's in a prison. I'm saying I want change in gun control to prevent one of the many guns in this county from getting into the wrong hands. Hands that need to feel the grip of others in this community and not the grip of a trigger. I'd like to applaud Congresswoman Brownley for holding this event and hearing the stories of our students. However, I'd like to ask, what is it exactly that you are going to do to make change? I noticed on the form that I had to fill out to be here that you are on committees for veterans and infrastructure. Can you tell me today that in the near future, maybe by the next time that you are reelected, you can be on a committee for gun control? Can you please not back down on this issue, even if right now the Democrats are the minority in the House? I think if you stay strong, that will change and that you can be a big part of helping that. So, yeah, what exactly?
Well, thank you very much. And first, just let me say thank you for standing up for your sister and standing up for all with special needs throughout our country. I applaud you for doing that, and I hope you will continue in that advocacy. And thank you for your advocacy around gun safety and gun safety regulation and ending gun violence. There is not a committee in Congress specifically on gun safety regulations, but I will tell you that there is a bipartisan gun violence prevention task force that I am an active member of. And this task force meets pretty regularly, and many of the bills that are in Congress today with that bipartisan support really generated from that committee. So I am on all of those bills. I'm a co-author of those bills, and I stand shoulder to shoulder with my members in Congress who have moved these bills forward, and I will continue to do so. I too was at the march here in Ventura. I participated. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago we had a sit-in in Congress. This was in response to the Speaker not allowing a simple background check, closing the loopholes on background checks, and if you're too dangerous to fly, you can't have access to a gun. There were two bills that had bipartisan support. Speaker wouldn't put them on the floor, so we had a sit-in Congress. He darkened the lights in the chambers. It's against the rules to do what we did, but we, as some of the students did yesterday, we bucked the rules and we sat there all night long, and we all gave speeches and made comments, and we all videotaped it, and the stream got outside of Congress because we learned from all of you, the young people, that you can stream on your cell phones and get your message out. So we've done all of those things, and I promise you, I am never going to give up on this fight. And there are many members in Congress that are never going to give up on this fight. And we will stay in it until we win it. And that's, I promise you that.
My name's Zach Logie. I'm also from Newbury Park High School. And I kind of wanted to share what it's like to be on a lockdown and not be aware of what's going on. A couple months ago, there was an armed robbery at a CVS very close to our school. And we had to spend 2 hours locked in our rooms, and we had to be dead silent. We didn't know what was going on. No one was telling us anything. We were getting things from the internet. People were trying to joke about it, but it was just forced laughter to try and make ourselves feel better. And ultimately, because of that, every single time we hear an announcement throughout the day, something as simple as whoever come to the office, we all flinch. We all get scared for a second. And I don't think that's how it should be. I don't think we should have to go to school with the constant fear of having someone walk into our rooms and shoot us. To be constantly afraid of dying. That is not how you spark ingenuity. That's not how you spark growth in students. That's how you spark fear and just oppression. And the other thing too is that we're not feeling any more safe as the days go by. It's not something that just becomes less of an issue. If anything, it's become more of an issue. As according to ABC News, 57 shootings have taken place this month as of since April 3rd. And that is ridiculous because every single time we hear about one, it just reinforces that idea that we're not safe and we're not going to be until something is done by the amazing people in Congress like you, Congresswoman Brownley. So I just want to thank you.
Well, thank you, Zach, for sharing that. And the story that you just shared is a story that I hear from so many students, not only here in the county, but across the country. And it's true that every time a shooting occurs, it just reinforces that fear and that worry about going to school, and many students sharing the fact of when I walk to school and I enter school, the first thing I do is find where I'm going to hide. And you know, our schools need to be safe, they need to be a place of learning, and they should certainly not be a place of fear. So thank you for being engaged, thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for being active in your school, and I just appreciate all that you're doing. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nathan. I'm 16, I'm a junior at Nordoff High School. And obviously, in a perfect world for the Democratic Party, they take the majority in this year's midterm. And my question to you would be, if your party does take the majority, what kinds of legislation would you introduce and try to pass to curb gun violence in inner cities and in schools?
Thank you for that question. It's an important question. And I do want to remind the audience that I'm here on official business. This is not a rally, so you know, I'm not being rah-rah, like some of you might have seen me at the rally at the march in Ventura, but I'm glad you asked the question, because I can just go through the checklist. Obviously, we need to close the loopholes on background checks. That should be fail-safe. That's a no-brainer. We need to ban assault weapons. To me, that's a no-brainer. We have to have a discussion around that, define what an assault weapon is. As I said in my remarks, I think we can support the Second Amendment and also have common sense gun safety laws, that they're not mutually exclusive. I think that we need to, each state needs to have a gun buyback program to institute that. I think we should have a ban on magazines that, you know, carry 20, 30 bullets in a magazine. That there's no need for that kind of ammunition. Eliminating bump stocks as is certainly, I mean, bump stocks and the magazines are two things that can take sort of a regular gun and make it a semi-automatic or an automatic weapon. So those are the first areas that I would go to. And then also, I think it's very important that we have the research and evidence-based programs for gun violence prevention. We know in the United States, we are way down at the bottom compared to other countries around the world who have instituted gun safety measures. And so that evidence base and that research, I think is really very important. But those are the things that come to mind that I think we can institute. And I think in most of those cases in Congress, there is bipartisan support for those. We just have to have the ability to bring those bills to the floor so that they can be voted on and instituted in law in our country. And I know each and every one of you here are going to help us make that happen.
Hi, my name is Ratika Iyer, and I'm a senior at Westlake High School. I would also like to share kind of the experience this whole movement has had on Westlake. So maybe 2 weeks after the fatal day of February 14th in Parkland, Westlake had our own version of it almost. So that week, someone had found on the girls' bathroom stall 4 girls, 4 guys, 9 guns on Friday. And that Friday, we were supposed to have a rally. So the day before that Friday, we found out that the rally was canceled because the bleachers weren't working. Well, on that same Friday, half the school showed up. And that morning, before I left for school, my mom gave me an extra long hug because she didn't know if I was going to come home that day. So, needless to say, it's really scary to find that you think you're safe at school and you think, oh my God, these are just happening so far away. It can happen really close to home. And then on March 14th, when we had our beautiful walkout, when a lot of students came out in support, a lot of students didn't come out in support because our school is pretty conservative. And we found out, and I, to my dismay, found out the next day that same threat was found on the bathroom stall. 4 girls, 4 boys, 9 guns this Friday. And then when I was walking down from the student parking lot, I found that someone had written white power on it, and it was tried scratched out by the school, but you could see it was there. So I want to thank everyone in this room for fighting, because I didn't know that it could happen so close to home, and it almost did. And if you never know if these things are real, if they're not, if they're really going to carry out these threats, if they're not. But it almost did. And I actually also do have a question for you. So I understand that gun violence restraining orders are legal in California, but I wanted to know if there's any push in Congress to make this a federal law where relatives all over the US can go to the police to ensure that their dangerous relatives can have their guns taken away.
Thank you first for sharing the story, and thank you for the question. And you're helping me out, because this is yet another piece of legislation in my list that I think we need to move forward on, because you know, family members know their family members, and if they really do believe that there are issues going on with a loved one, that they might threaten their own lives or the life of someone else, that it's important for that family member to have the ability to have a restraining order, so that, you know, a dangerous weapon doesn't get in the wrong hands and another tragedy occurs. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for sharing what's going on in your high school. And I will just say that you know, this advocacy is not only a national quest, but it's also a local quest too. And so I think, you know, raise your voices at school and ask that your teachers and administrators allow you to have the conversation about how you think we could make our school a safer place. I know I've been in contact with a lot of the school districts across the county, and I know there's probably not one that is not taking into account or looking at ways in which to make their campuses safer, whether it's, you know, more fencing, whether it's surveillance, whether it's one point of entry. There are a number of things that schools can move forward on, and I think the federal government should offer a helping hand in terms of resources schools may need across the country to make sure that everything is being done to make schools safe. But certainly in terms of the exterior and what's going on around those schools, that's going to require city councils to weigh in, it's going to require state legislatures to weigh in, and hopefully Congress to weigh in as well. So, thank you.
Our next question.
Hello, my name is India Howitt. I'm a junior at La Reina High School. In 1919, the United States Supreme Court in the United States v. Schenck limited our First Amendment right by stating that we could not shout fire into a crowd. And in 1983, the Supreme Court in the United States v. Knotts limited our Fourth Amendment right in stating that people could not expect privacy of their location on public roads. And then in 2008, in D.C. v. Heller, the Supreme Court stated that people had an individual right to bear arms. But even in that case, and I quote, they stated, like most rights, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. It is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever, in any manner whatsoever, and for whatever purpose. So I know you've addressed this briefly, but I wondered if you could comment more on the relationship between enacting gun control and the Second Amendment.
Well, thank you for that. This Heller versus the District of Columbia, the Supreme Court case that she's citing, to me is a very important one relative to that balance. Yes, you do have the right to a gun, but we know that we have to have some insinuating, inferring that we're going to have some restrictions around weapons of war and others. It doesn't say that exactly, but the inference from the Supreme Court is there. And so I think it's a very important case in terms of moving forward. And there's not much that I can add, except that I think that it is extremely important, community by community, that we continue to have these discussions, because I do believe if you look at the statistics, across the country, it's overwhelming. The American people want background checks. They want bans on weapons of war. They want to move forward on common sense gun safety legislation. And this issue of the Second Amendment is always there, and it's always front and center. And some people think it's the elephant in the room, but I think if we have the conversations and understand what we're talking about, that we aren't talking about ripping your guns away, that you have a right of self-defense. There's no question about that. but we've got to have the conversation and get into detail. And I think, just the issue of assault weapons, just that terminology itself, people in this room might define it very differently, what all of that means. And so we have to have those conversations, define what we're talking about, be very, very specific. And I think through doing that, we can and will find common ground. The other issue is a political issue, and that is the advocacy of the NRA. And the NRA is a very powerful organization, and it impacts leaders and politicians and public servants who have the ability to make decisions around this. And I think there's no doubt in my mind, part of the advocacy of the NRA is why we haven't seen these common sense bipartisan bills on the House floor of Congress. And so something has to be done about that. Today I'm wearing my pen. It's an F, and I'm proud to say that this is my score on the NRA scorecard. So. That, if we study the First Amendment and we study the Fourth Amendment and we study the Second Amendment and know that just in 2008 in this Heller versus the District of Columbia, that the Supreme Court made it pretty clear about the balance of being able to own and access guns, the right of self-defense, but on the other hand, to have some control as well. So thank you.
We have 9 students who still have questions, and we're only scheduled to be in the room for another 15 minutes. So maybe we could go through and let everyone ask their questions so that we can get everything on the record. And
very good.
You could maybe sum up some answers.
Hey, my name is Jacob Torres. I'm from Frontier High School. I have a question for you. What would your opinion be on gun violence in this state?
Okay. Let's keep, yeah.
Okay, so I'm a junior at Westlake High School, and I don't necessarily agree with most of you guys. I would consider myself conservative. I believe that the laws that we have right now in Congress are sufficient to prevent gun violence. However, we are not enforcing them. What we should focus on is on getting the enforcement to our law enforcement and the FBI, and creating that connection between all of our law enforcement departments to stop gun shootings. According to the Journal of Firearms and Public Policy, firearms are used over 3.5 million times in self-defense annually, and 400,000 of these say that it has saved their life or one of their loved ones' lives. So continuing to add more laws and prevent ordinary citizens from getting firearms is not the answer. We just need to enforce the laws that we have right now.
Thank you.
And for my question, how would you define an assault weapon?
Thank you.
So we're going to go to Sarah. Yeah, we're just going to go.
So you know what? I think I might have to take 3 at a time because I might not be able to remember at all, and I want to be sure and answer people's questions.
Okay, hi, my name is Sarah Cohen. I'm a senior at Thousand Oaks High School, and I know in this upcoming election that there is the smallest number of returning Republican incumbents seeking re-election. This was kind of addressed earlier, but there's a lot of talk, especially from the youth, about shifting the tide and the discretion on the House floor. Do you see this shifting, and if so, with the shift, do you see significant change coming from it, or do you still think that bipartisanship will be a difficult issue?
Thank you. So the first question, I think had to do with California laws. In relationship to this issue, California has, in many ways, led the way. I served in the state legislature, so I was intimately involved for 6 years, from 2006 to 2012. So I think the state legislature in California is doing its due diligence, and I think they have moved forward with a lot of this common sense gun safety legislation and moved forward. So I think we're It's not to say that there's not going to be gun violence in the state of California, but I think that they are doing what they need to be doing in terms of moving forward. And I want to thank you for being here and having a different opinion and being able to speak up and speak out in terms of what your opinion is. I think that that is a very, very important part to having a successful conversation and moving the ball forward. So I really appreciate it that you're here. And in a way, I agree with you because I think that there are some rules on the books that aren't being fully instituted, and we need to do that. This NICS, the National Background Check, is a perfect example of that, where agencies are supposed to provide into a central data bank data on the mental health of people and whether they have committed crimes and that sort of thing, so that we have, when there is a background check, they can go to a database that is accurate and up to date and know. And so, it was a small step Congress took, but it was a step that both the NRA and people like myself who are advocating for some more common sense gun safety bills all agreed upon. And that was one of the pieces of the legislation in the spending bill that occurred, is to kind of firm that up and be able to rightly institute that and have it be foolproof. So I do agree with you. I still will, and I want your voice in the mix of all of this, but for me personally, I still believe that most conservatives, most who you might portray as more liberals, you could say Democrats and Republicans, but when you think about just common sense, some of these simple, straightforward, common sense gun safety bills, there is unanimous consent. And I have spoken individually with many, many people who are NRA members, and proudly so, who have told me they too support common sense gun safety bills. So, we've all got to come together and figure this out collectively. So thank you. And the last question is, yes, I think there is change, and change is happening, and change is coming. And there have been more retirements in Congress in the history of our country at this particular moment, and that's consequential. And I think this election, the 2018 election, and I hope every young person here is registered to vote, and you can register in California at 16 and 17 in anticipation of being able to vote at 18, but I think it is you, and it is your voice, and it is your activism, and it is your power of your voice and your vote that are going to make the change that we all want. And I have huge hope, and there's always hope if there's resiliency in the power of the people who are engaged. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Nathan Ramos Rodriguez. I'm the activist in Santa Paula organizing Santa Paula High School during these marches. But one of the questions I have is, why aren't these conversations taking place in places like Santa Paula, Fillmore, and Oxnard, where gun violence is more prone? We see this thing often more than anyone else here, and yet we're the minority of the situation. We are not hearing the talks like this. My colleagues would love to come out here, but they don't have the same right situation where they could just drive over here. They all have different situations where they can't come all the way to places like Camarillo. So the question I'm going to ask you is, the next time you have this, will you have it in one of these gun-prone places? And I would also like to ask, schools have been thinking of switching out their students' privacy for more security, having metal detectors, having see-through backpacks. Is that right? Because that will only increase racial profiling for people of color just like me.
Thank you.
Williston Cipher, and I'm a junior at Newbury Park High School. And after a massacre in 1996 that killed 35 people, Australia introduced strict gun control laws banning semi-automatic and military-grade guns for civilian use. No mass shootings have occurred since. Is it possible for the United States to follow the Australian model? Why or why not? And if so, what are the first steps? And we as Americans view ourselves as leaders of the free world. What precedent do we want to set for countries with developing economies and ones who recently embraced democracy?
Yes.
Yeah, so my question was kind of asked earlier, so I'm going to make it sort of brief, but I'm Sam Church from Newbury Park High School. So I was just wondering, long term, like with hopefully with the changes and, like kind of power that occurred in our, House and Senate, hopefully. I was just wondering like where you stand on like, more strict gun control, and buybacks and stuff too. I know you talked about this briefly earlier, but like in regards to the Second Amendment and kind of the precedent that has been set, and kind of the ambiguity around it, and how a lot of people don't agree on what it specifically protects people to do. I was wondering how do we move on, long term with potential mandatory buybacks or something of that sort, to decrease the amount of guns total in our country, and do that in a way that doesn't isn't shut down by the Supreme Court, and how we do that, and also whether you would support kind of extreme measure like that in the distant future. So that was my question. And also, I wanted to quickly say that the League of Ventura County Women's Voters, the League of Women's Voters of Ventura County, are outside and they're doing voter registration and pre-registration if anyone's interested. So.
Thank you. So first, in terms of having something like this in Oxnard or Santa Paula, Fillmore, absolutely, we will do that. And actually, we looked everywhere to find a venue for this for today, and it was actually pretty difficult because it was on a Saturday, because we really wanted to have it at a school site. We thought that was the most appropriate place, but it was just, it was difficult to do. But we will, and your point is well taken. And I will say too, so your other piece of your question was around profiling and security measures at schools. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, and I think that we've got to take every step to make our campuses safe. But there are ways in which to do that where there is without bias, without the possibility of profiling and the like. And certainly from the Parkland tragedy, one of the things that came up was to say that teachers should have guns. That that's one way in which to make our campuses more safe. And I adamantly oppose that and think that is absolutely the wrong direction to go in. But we do need to make sure that we know and understand all of the best practices, not only in California, but across the country, in terms of everything that we can do to make our schools safe without any unintended consequences to it. So thank you. And Australia, is it possible that the United States did what Australia did? It's always possible, but we have to have the commitment to do that. And I think that you asked how do we begin that? I think we've already begun. And I think what's happening across our country and the engagement and the activism of you, the young people in our country, is the most important piece of all of this in terms of getting to those goals. And I will just say generally, we all have our sort of paths on the road, and it's important that we respect each other's paths on the road, and people have different issues. In some cases, it might be issues that don't relate to gun violence prevention, but let's not kick anybody off of the road. I think we're all trying to get here to the same direction, and I think it's possible, and I think that we will, and I think that we are at the beginning of a very important journey, but it is going to take time, and it's going to take persistence, and I think we have taken a moment and made it into a movement, but that movement has to continue. And if you go back into our history and you look to the civil rights movement and to the Vietnam War and others, it was then the young people who made that movement and made change. And you are going to make that change for our country, and we're already on that trajectory and on that journey. So thank you very much. And is that all three? Did I miss one?
No, you didn't.
Oh, okay.
So now we're going to start with over here.
Hi, my name is Maritza. I am a senior at Ventura High School, and I was part of the youth group that went to Washington, D.C. alongside Anthony and Rosita. As we continue the fight for gun control, I want to thank you for being so supportive. This question was already mentioned, and a few questions ago, you mentioned that you hope that the federal government can support schools across the nation with resources for better safety on campuses. As Nathan said, how would you, especially with other representatives, how do we prevent the criminalization of our youth of color, especially since when these tragedies happen, administrators are quick to want to enforce more security on campus, and our youth of color are being neglected because they are going to be targeted more. So how do you think we can prevent that?
Well, I think, we have to prevent it, but in order to prevent it, you need to raise your voices. This is happening classroom by classroom, school by school, and it is important that your voice and your collective voice is engaged in that process, and going to your school board meetings, going to your principals at your schools, and making sure that the policymakers are providing policies at your schools that are bias free, are bully free, all of that. I mean, the condition at schools should be one of acceptance of everyone, and everyone has an equal right to a high quality education, and I believe very firmly in that. And so the only way to correct a wrong is to step up and speak out, and it has to happen, I think, in every single community and at every school and every classroom. And so I just encourage you, as you are using your voice today, about sort of a national level, to use your voice also as well at school, to make sure that your school is setting the proper and appropriate bias-free policies for the students who attend there. Thanks.
Hello? Yeah. Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Bryce. I'm a senior at Oak Grove School, and I've been very passionate about this problem in our country. I have not personally been affected by it, but I mean, in terms of someone close to me being murdered, but I've seen this problem for so long, and like I've heard the stories of people who've lost their sons, their husbands, their wives, and just it's terrible. And actually, I went to Ventura College, and there was this person who came to present, and she, her son was actually murdered in front of her house because of something that happened in their school, and she shared her story, and it was just heartbreaking. And my question is, in terms of red flag warnings and background checks, what needs to be done to authoritate the checking of people who are mentally ill, who in no way need to be near such harmful guns? What needs to be done to authoritate it? What can be done?
Well, I think what needs to be done, and hopefully is we are on track to getting it done, is to having a comprehensive database across our country. So if anyone is going to purchase a gun and they have the background check, that the data is there, because I can give you one example after another, where the data wasn't there and a person who should not have access to a gun had access to a gun. And we've got to do things like, a wait period to make sure that we can scrub all of the data and make sure that it has all been looked at and seen, and that it is fail-safe before that gun is purchased. But I don't think it's that complicated, honestly. But it is a matter of all of the agencies involved provide the data into one central data bank that is the tool to be used for a background check. And of course, we have to close background checks too, because right now we have these loopholes that say, well, if you go to a gun show, you don't need a background check. If you buy a gun online, no background check. So those loopholes absolutely have to be closed. And I will say that the NRA initially on background checks supported background checks a decade or so ago, but then issues like gun shows and the internet, people are buying more guns through those outlets than they are going to gun stores at the moment, but now the NRA doesn't want to support closing in on any of those loopholes, but that is clearly an extremely important piece of the equation to make sure that guns are in the hands of people who are responsible and not in the hands of people who may do harm to themselves or to others. Oh, did I do the final three, or did I interrupt it? I messed up the system. Okay.
Hi, my name is Kimia Mohebi. I'm a senior at Oak Park High School. I led the March 14th walkout at Oak Park, and I personally haven't been affected by gun violence, but after the Oaks shooting, the entire Iranian American community really bled for the victim, and it was a really tough loss for everyone. I know myself and other members of the Iranian American community in the area really felt hurt by it. But my question doesn't have to do with that. It actually has to do with Proposition 63. So I know California Prop 63 works to make ammunition less easily accessible in California. It requires background checks and before you purchase ammunition, and it prohibits possession of large capacity ammunition. My question is this: are we, as a community, actively working to make sure this proposition is enforced? And also, how can we, as individuals, a part of the state of California, inform members of other states that this proposition is possible for them in their state? I know we usually focus on our own community individually, but I think that as a nation, we need to all band together.
I couldn't agree with you more. Go on, next question.
Hi, my name is Victoria Barrios. I'm a senior at Westlake High School. I'm 17 years old, and actually my brother was a survivor of gun violence. So everything I speak from personal experience and all of my activism. I want to hear politicians start saying their names: Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, Alton Sterling, Trayvon Martin. I want to hear politicians say the words Black Lives Matter, and racial profiling and mass incarceration and institutionalized racism. I want to hear them say things that scare them, like intersectional feminism is the answer, resistance is the answer. I want to hear them acknowledge gender as a spectrum and work to regulate gender-neutral bathrooms in city-owned spaces. I want them to dismantle cis and heteronormativity in their own lives, in their workplaces and at home. I want them to work to end all gun violence, not just mass shootings. I want to hear them condemn the police officers who murder unarmed Black men and women, and acknowledge the victims and survivors in inner cities. Say that our gun violence problem is not just due to our access of guns, but our weaponization and dehumanization of people of color, and because of poverty and our gun culture. Recognize that America's gun culture operates because of our history of imperialist greed and colonization, and that any space we utilize as a public forum once belonged to Indigenous people. I understand politics. I understand politics is a game of power, that being moderate gets you places, that you appeal to more people, that you can propel yourself forward without saying anything too controversial. But Martin Luther King Jr. was more afraid of moderates than the KKK. He said, "I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who's more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action." So I'm just telling you to be careful that you do not remain liberal-leaning moderate to gain power and that get stuck in the cycle of maintaining that power at the expense of marginalized people. And I do have a question for you. How are we going to change the dynamic of the police so we can restore trust in our public servants and end the unjust killings of people of color?
Hi, my name's Emily Francis. I'm a freshman at Oak Park High School, and I have a question around loopholes in background checking. So if a mentally sound and eligible individual qualifies for and buys a gun, and when this individual passes away, they want to give their gun to their son or daughter, what are the rules around making sure their son or daughter is eligible to own a gun, or how can the individual just give their son or daughter the gun?
Thank you. So, Prop 63, I'm sorry, Prop 63, I think an important initiative moved by California, which tends to sort of lead the way. And usually when that happens, other states, other like-minded states will take on that. And so I hope that they do. But I think certainly the basic tenets of Prop 63 are what we've been talking about in terms of passing national legislation around, because I think it hits upon sort of the key elements where we can make some very significant steps towards gun violence safety. So I think it's important, and again, I just want to continue to say that your advocacy is very important, and to sort of move that forward and not to give up, because we've succeeded here in California, but we've got to continue at the national level to have this national legislation that really crosses our country and addresses those states that have legislatures who don't seem to want to take that initiative. So thank you for that, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on it. So, and your name again was? Victoria. So Victoria, thank you. I think in terms of the statement that you made, I think it's a perfect way, in a sense, to come to a conclusion in this town hall, because I think everything that you said is really important, and I don't think we're going to get to these goals until we have policymakers standing up and speaking out and addressing the issues of Black Lives Matter, institutional racism, all of the things that you mentioned are critically important, and the issue around public safety and our police and finding where the right balance is. I think that this is a dangerous. It's dangerous for me to have a very quick response to it because it's a very complicated issue. But I agree with the tenets in kind of where you're going on this, but it's very hard always to find the kind of the right balance, but moving forward. But I will say, justice delayed is justice denied. We can't just sit idly by and not do anything. And so the important thing is to do something, and the way in which we're going to do something is the power of you and your voices and your vote to get the right people elected, so that we can have these conversations and figure out the right policies and move our country forward. So thank you, and stay engaged. It's really, really important. And the last question was around still the background checks and loopholes and gifting guns to your children or other family members. And I think, thank you for raising that, because this is just another issue around closing those loopholes. And I think that we have to address that. To be honest with you, I'm pretty sure the legislation that we have in terms of background checks that we've been talking about during this session does not include that piece, and it's debate. I mean, I think we have to debate whether we should include that now in the legislation. It is, for hunters and advocates of hunting and that sort of thing. It's a real issue for them, and so I think it was purposeful to leave it out at this moment, to try to get that, to have that bipartisan support and to move that forward. Sometimes you can't get everything done that you want to get done in one piece of legislation, and you have to take incremental steps to get there. But your point is well taken, and I personally think it should be part of that and we should include it. But my most important objective is getting it done. And if we have to get it done in 2 steps, I want to get it done in 2 steps, rather than not getting anything done at all. So thank you for that. So I just want to conclude. I know I have some closing remarks here. There are things in here that I'm supposed to say, and I want to make sure that I do. But I really do want to thank all of you for being here, and I think we've had a good conversation, a good beginning conversation that I look forward to having more conversations and deeper conversations, and particularly to the young people who are here, thank you for your engagement, and thank you to many of you who really share personal stories, and that's hard to do, and I'm a firm believer in terms of if you're taking that step, it's an important step towards healing, so I really appreciate you doing that. And for anyone who didn't have the opportunity to speak or to share, please reach out to my office and contact me. I'm in Washington most of the time during the week, but I come back every weekend, and every once in a while we have a work period at home where I have a whole week in the district office, so I would love to meet with you on a one-on-one basis where we can drill down a little deeper in terms of these issues. And certainly if there are any suggestions for legislation for me to take back to Washington, I want to hear that from all of you. So let's continue to talk. Please stay in touch with me and my office, and we will, begin to plan more opportunities like this. And certainly you can visit my website at juliabrownley.house.gov, and you can contact me there, and you can make comments there, and you can sign up for my e-newsletter, and you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and I can follow you on Facebook and Twitter, and all the very good things that each and every one of you are doing. And I'm more heartened and hopeful every single day. Just even today, to hear from the students who are doing particular things and going to the Newbury City Council meetings, and the steps that you're taking in your own schools, to hear about those experiences are very, very heartening, because we tend to hear about the movement that's happening, and we certainly saw on the news yesterday about the walkouts that took place across the country, including right here in the county. But it's nice to hear that all these other things are happening, because these small steps really do add up. And I encourage you all, and I'm so proud of you, and I brag about you all the time back in Washington, D.C. And it was already mentioned once before, but just to say one more time that the League of Women Voters are here registering students to vote. So if anyone is not registered to vote and you're 16 years or older, please don't walk out of here without registering. And last but not least, I know that many of you are going to your prom tonight, and so for you to be here and have a prom tonight, when you might be getting your nails done or getting ready for the big event tonight, but have a wonderful time at your prom, and be sure to be safe. Have a lot of fun, but be safe as well. And again, thank you all for being here. The adults, thank you for being here. And we will continue in this journey and this fight until we win. So thank you very much.